Good evening and welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Brother Yusuf. Welcome to the Joko conversation tonight. And as always, I am joined by my partner and my comrade, Tasha. Hi, Tasha.
Hi, Yusuf, and hello, everybody. um, yeah, and
Yes.
beginning as we always do, um, calling to the forefront are all of the parenting energies in our life path, our personal parents, their parents, those who parented them, aunts and uncles, teachers and experiences, all of the energies that have helped us become the kind of people who put at the forefront of their uh, life intent, their life work, doing all they can and joining the effort to realize a just, harmonious, equitable uh, world in which all its peoples are thriving. Um, However long term a commitment that might be, we're not afraid of protracted, and that sense of determination, um, doubtless, is a product of our life experiences and is our concern and love for humanity, um, and all the other creatures of the planet. And we also uplift and acknowledge and bring to the forefront of our consciousness as members of the African global family, all of those great champions of this cause who have emerged from the African global family, who have engaged their ingenuity and creativity and courage and leadership and strategy and uh, all of the other things, all of the other qualities that it takes, who have moved this envelope forward and pushed this project, right, of world liberation from oppression, the end of oppressive structures, have pushed that envelope forward, um, in tremendous ways. And so there have certainly been many in many walks of life coming from the African global family. We always bring them to the forefront, and we always uh, assert and project and say loudly that we know that any work that we are doing for the liberation of African peoples and the oppressed peoples of the world, we are doing at the hospitality of the original people of this occupied USA, of this occupied California, of this occupied Los Angeles. We know it's at the hospitality of the ancestors of these lands and those who continue to preserve the cultures and languages of these original peoples, who uh, continue to uphold uh, the sovereignty and claim of the land, who have been relentless and remain stalwart as examples for
Yes.
us all. And we never lose sight of that, right? As so many, this very popular movement to assert, and so often this notion of the foundational Black American um, prioritizes the relationship with European colonists and colonizer,
Hmm.
and those colonizing forces and those capitalizing forces and all of that, prioritizes that relationship and the history of that relationship outside of its African ancestry, and certainly outside of any history of alliance with the actual peoples of this land. And kind of in that notion, even when people are not identified as foundational Black Americans and all those different kinds of varieties of that, we lose sight, right?
Yeah.
We lose sight, right? And think this is this between us and the white man, and this is this is this dichotomy of African European, and we do not lose sight of the continuum, right? This historical continuum, and where we are. We
Yes.
are the descendants of the cargo, right? We are the
Yes.
descendants of the cargo, and know where our just and proper alliances lie. And so, having said all of that, with our usual opening invocation, Yusuf, I pass the mic back to you.
Um, you know, Picking up on what you were just talking about, the Nigerian writer, Nigerian scholar, Chinwezu. I mean, that's the title of his best known book, I think, right? The West and the Rest of Us, right? Because it is a global thing, right? Western expansion, right? It didn't leave any it had, part of the globe um, unmolested, and to the point of the colonization of space, right? Or at least the atmosphere with the satellites um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's
Mm-hmm.
even now a space force, which
Yes.
again in the United States, both mainstream, political parties of the duopoly are on board with. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Space Force became a thing under Trump 1.0, if as I recall. And it didn't go away under Biden. I mean, it continued to receive its funding and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, just that, but I think the doctrine, full spectrum dominance, um, you know, um,
Mm-hmm.
ideally, their
Mm-hmm.
policy of air dominance, naval dominance, and
Mm-hmm.
land dominance, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that land
Mm-hmm.
dominance has certainly been challenged on the ground over protracted, as you know indicated, struggle, right, in Afghanistan, in Iran. I'm sorry, Iraq. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
Iran is on the mind right now.
Mm-hmm.
The So yeah. Anyway, I just as you were speaking and making that point of the importance of thinking beyond that dichotomy, and really
Mm-hmm.
I, the history, right? The historical moment is um, is really demonstrating the fallacy of the FBA ADOS, movement or counter movement, whatever, um, in this moment when the United States as a particular, colonial imperial nation state is being so belligerent in the world, um, trying to hold its grip on hegemony as it's being outstripped by its economic
Mhm.
competitors, particularly China,
Mhm.
but also,
Mhm.
the evolving and reforming relationships among global South countries, which is really, again, the most of the world, right?
Mhm.
And even what we think of as global South is, north of a lot of of the global South. Um, so, this is not the time to be hitching your wagon, right, to the sink that or to the ship that's sinking. I mean, if you don't mind me mixing my metaphors right there. I mean,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it really is, I guess,
Mhm.
hitching your dinghy, right, to the sinking
Right.
ship.
You making sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
and at a time, when the future is the global South, right? I mean, that's very much what's happening, and that's kind of, so our hence our
Mhm.
title for tonight, expanding horizons of despair. Right? And I did quote myself, right? I quoted myself from the poem "Manifest Destiny," right, which is about
Mhm.
U.S. imperialism, the
Mhm.
its own self-identified rationalization for its territorial expansion, right, in the 19th century and then into the 20th century, into the 21st century. But this repositioning, certainly of the U.S., right, and that we've had enough of these uppity folks in the former colonies,
Mhm.
and it's time to
Mhm.
recolonize, muscularly, with
Mhm.
the whole reemergence of the so-called Monroe Doctrine,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
their explicit, this
Mhm.
current regime's explicit, um, assertions, right, that it was going to be shifting to the Americas, reasserting its will, and we've seen them already, right, with the threats against Greenland, the kidnapping of the president, and the compromising at gunpoint, basically, of the current
Mhm.
Bolivian, Bolivia, excuse me, Bolivarian,
Mhm.
government in Venezuela, the elected government of
Yeah.
Venezuela,
Yeah.
despite what folks want to
Yeah.
say, those who still want to dispute that.
Yeah.
But basically being forced to cooperate in some way because they've got a gun at their heads, right?
Mhm.
So, and now this latest action in Ecuador, as of what, yesterday maybe, with they're doing joint actions to go after, again, so-called identified drug cartels in Ecuador.
Mhm.
But again,
Mhm.
this reinvigorating of this muscular so-called
Yes.
war on drugs, right? That the Reagan
Yes.
administration um, used to get troops, into these advisors all throughout South America, and now
Mhm.
the Trump
Mhm.
administration, along with a couple of the other federal agencies like the DEA and Ecuadorian troops. Again, Ecuador, a place where the where the progressive turn, right, in that period of what they were calling the pink tide in Latin America, when
Mhm.
Chavez was still alive, also.
Mhm.
Ecuador, right, becomes
Mhm.
one of those targets for undermining. And if I remember right, just like Chavez, I think it was the progressive socialist, um, or at least socialist leaning president of Ecuador who also somehow contracted cancer and died.
Mm. Okay.
And a counter revolutionary movement able to supplant the left and take power. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
this muscular turn that they're trying to make to recolonize the
Yeah.
global south, or to a neo-colonialism has run its course, right? um,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're just trying to go back to old old colonialism.
Right. This kind of bald-faced subjugation. There's no
Hmm.
pretext or pretense to this notion of the spread of democracy discourse that's
Exactly.
been, I mean, they're challenging that notion here, right?
Exactly,
With
because
the
they're
other
not even trying to be democratic.
rhetoric, right? This
Yeah,
isn't a democracy. This is a constitutional republic.
this is
It's
a
never been, that's
constitutional republic.
part of their platform. And this
Exactly.
kind, yeah, this kind of, and all this language that you hear in, that you hear in commentary about the new
Hmm.
gunboat diplomacy, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
um, yeah, it is that open declaration
Yeah.
without pretense, which, as a lot of people say, is maybe preferable. I'm not going to try to
Right.
present
Well,
one
just in
or the
terms of the
other,
clarity, right? You know that.
just in terms of the clarity,
Right.
the clarity does help some things, but
Right.
the
Yeah.
real pressures and the real time, what the real time acceleration and expansion of pressure and suffering
Yes.
that it represents
The
is not
harm.
desirable. It's not okay. It's not good.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and and yeah, so but yeah, and here we are with Rubio also making his declaration to those who he considers his European family. Come on,
Mm.
kith and kin. We're the great Europe.
Right.
Let's make the
Exactly.
West great
The one,
again. Let us make
the
the
one for
West
which
great
he
again.
received the standing ovation. Is that the
Yes,
one
they
you're
said
talking about? Yeah.
that half the room, yeah, half the room stood up,
Hmm.
and so yeah, I mean, we understand the wishful thinking. We understand the wishful thinking, and also don't under what is it uh uh underrepresent the ways in which uh they are formidable, but also understand that formidable does not mean invulnerable, and
That's
they
right.
absolutely over estimate their own surety, their own
Hmm.
victory is not certain. Though they
That's
absolutely believe their own white supremacist press,
right. Hmm.
so
Hmm.
um go ahead. I
But
just
that's
had
already, that's already being challenged, right? I mean, as currently the war on Iran, they're taking bloody noses, and severe damage also.
mm-hmm,
Though that is being reported, um, how should I say, um, irregularly, at least in mainstream Western press that I've seen. And I've
mm-hmm,
followed a little on, I've been following the Western reporting on BBC a little bit, MS Now a little bit, CNN a little bit, right? And then
mm-hmm,
they will often, that is, yeah, when I'm looking at mainstream, right? And they will often share clips of what Fox or One America is doing and stuff, as they might be commenting on it. So,
mm-hmm,
and what you're getting from that, and particularly along with the narrative that's particularly being promoted by Hegseth, right? Is
Mhm.
a not reporting on the kinds of hits, that the U.S. is taking in particular. Um,
Mhm.
hits on
Mhm.
sure, reporting on the what's happening in Israel, right? But this is to evoke sympathy, right, for Israelis, right?
Mhm.
Um, reporting the on Iranian missiles falling in these other Gulf states,
Mhm.
but framing it as if they're attacks on those Gulf states instead of attacks on the U.S. installations in those states, right?
Mhm.
So some duplicity and some of how that's
Sure.
being reported in particular places, right? You know,
Mhm.
uh, in the mainstream, right? Again, uh,
Yeah.
but but you got to go to um, alternative, sources, independent news sources to learn, um,
Mhm.
the method, right, and how methodical the Iranian response has been,
Mhm.
how effective
Mhm.
it's been, um,
Mhm.
and yes, right, that them learning in real
Mhm.
time that they are not
Mhm.
invulnerable, right, and are already feeling the effects of that, right? Yeah.
And as I'm hearing and listening, predictable.
Mm-hmm.
There's been, there hasn't been any I haven't heard any conversation about, oh, any of this comes as a great surprise. All of, all that Iran is doing has been, as folk are discussing it, like you hear diplomats and uh, some of these ex-diplomats, and other folk who have worked in um, worked in the U.S. government, and other just and other pundits and critics saying, yeah, the reason why the West has attempted to avoid, and any and all of the preceding presidents have attempted to avoid uh, this kind of direct confrontation with Iran is because their only way out is what is happening now, and that's been well understood. And the threat of it leading to catastrophic, catastrophic
Mm-hmm.
um, economic ramifications globally,
Yeah.
you know, is and so I don't outside of the as you said that mainstream American media, um, folk are not mealy mouthed about
No.
understanding that this is the only way this could have gone. This has
Yeah.
long been predicted and well understood.
And
Been
well
well
understood,
understood,
exactly, and well
you know.
understood that even
Yeah.
this feckless U.S. Congress, has members asking the right questions, right?
Mhm.
Even among the Republican supporters of the
Mhm.
regime, um, asking the right questions because of the manner in which they decided to go in. I mean, it predictable in another way, also, just in terms of how this regime operates. Right? They don't care about data. They don't
Mhm.
care about expert opinion.
No
Right?
reflection.
You know,
Right.
so and well, it didn't matter. So that didn't matter, and the again, it's a joint war, right? It's an Israeli war and a U.S. war, and certainly precipitated by the settler colonial state of Israel,
Mhm. Mhm.
and whatever Israel's reasons, and part of which is this, along with the or maybe I should say in alignment, right, with this call for a reinvigorated, Western imperialism, and um, militaristic, imperialism, is the
Mhm.
notion of greater Israel, right, and the way in which Israel has used the last couple of years, and decades, but certainly these last couple of years, to seize territory, to reconfigure Western Asia and Northern Africa and Northeast Africa, right, in a way that makes them the hegemon in the region. That they're
Mhm.
occupying parts of Syria, which they were already doing in the Golan Heights, that then
Mhm.
Trump, you know,
Mhm.
officially
Yeah.
recognized as, I think, in Trump 1.0, but they had been
Mm.
occupying. And now they're occupying other parts of Syria since the fall of the Assad government and this whatever is there now, which is, again, points out the duplicity of the world hegemon, the U.S. Right, as the former quote unquote Al Qaeda who are now reformed. But then there are reports of attacks on minority communities, particularly who aren't particular types of Muslim, and I suppose Sunni or Wahhabi,
Mhm.
perhaps, I don't know,
Mhm.
but certainly on the Christian
Mhm.
community, I would, and
Mhm.
maybe there's a Druze community in Syria, um,
Mhm.
but that no one's calling for their protection, or as
Mhm.
say they might be in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, close to the
Mhm.
border of the alliance of Sahelian states, the where Bill
Mhm.
Maher is wanting to talk about Christian genocide going on, despite Christians and Muslims and the Nigerian government saying,
So Genesis,
stop trying
yeah.
to stir up stuff, right? The
Yeah.
Okay, all right, Israel, right, bombing Lebanon. Why, right? I don't
Mhm.
even know that Hezbollah, who are Shia,
Mhm.
right, entered the
Mhm.
fight. And in fact, that they were asked to withhold, and as far as I knew, they were respecting the wishes of the Lebanese government because they knew that that would precipitate. But Israel attacked anyway.
Mhm.
Rania Khalek was reporting, who's based in Beirut, um,
Yes.
living under the bombs, right?
Mhm.
Reports that Israel is sending these evacuation notices to southern
Yeah.
Lebanese villages, right? That they
Right.
intend to occupy, right? So this notion of greater Israel,
Mhm.
and the very kind of, well, what do they, what have people been saying? Every accusation is a confession.
Mhm.
All these claims about the apocalyptic vision of the
Yeah.
Iranian clerical leadership,
Right.
but it is that
Right.
it is that Christian Zionist apocalyptic vision that is
Mhm.
driving this foreign policy, not the
Mhm.
data
Mhm.
of experts who predicted what is now
Right.
unfolding.
Right. Right. Right.
Foreign
Absolutely.
policy, the Christian nationalists are and Christian Zionists are in
Mhm.
control of U.S. foreign
Mhm.
policy and the
Mhm.
U.S. military, particularly
Mhm.
embodied in the person of one Pete Hegseth,
Makes sense. Mhm.
a Deus Vult crusader.
Right. And of course, is that conversation by Huckabee? Was it Huckabee?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Huckabee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, something about
Precise.
Huckabee about Genesis being the original contract, and and certainly Israel could um, expand. What is this?
Mm-hmm.
The conversation he was having with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah,
Is within its rights because of the Genesis contract and all of these
because of
kinds
the
of
biblical rights.
yes, these biblical rights that they're just kind of steadily pushing because
Mm-hmm.
steadiness wins the race, right? And
Mm-hmm.
coupled with the those reports that have been asserted across the board, mainstream outlets and alternative outlets, about troops being told that, hey, Trump is
Mm-hmm.
anointed by Jesus to
Mm-hmm.
to enter into this region, and this is a holy war, or whatever the language is,
Mm-hmm.
Armageddon. they're billing it as,
Hmm.
whatever it is they're however it is they're presenting it, which also presumes, though there is a lot of complaint and pushback, it also presumes a certain that there'll be a receptivity. I mean, you don't just go and make those kinds of statements if you don't think that there's no ears, right? There's no one there. There are no ears to hear, to
Yeah.
receive that message, and so a kind of a confidence in the effectiveness of the propaganda and the conditioning and all of these kinds of things, which reaches also into this hyper or this insertion of Trump into uh, like modern evangelical mythology of the
Mhm.
rapture or whatever it is,
Mhm.
where he's very much present with that, which is also underreported. It's
Mhm.
underreported. Still, still trying to dismiss that kind. What that's I'll just call it a school of thought. It's a school of belief. Um, as fringe as just the refusal to recognize it. It's like, well, you better recognize,
Yeah. But it
because
ain't
a lot of
fringe. It's like right at the center of power
yes,
now, right? I
sir,
mean, it's minority,
yes,
right? It's my,
really, right.
yeah.
Even though it's still it's a bit it's obscured. The middle
Mhm.
the media is doing interesting things. You know what I'm saying? It'll show Trump being prayed over by all by these by these tongue talking evangelicals after the inauguration. But where's the discussion of those implications? Where's
Mhm.
the broader
What are the
discourse?
implications of, again, this Reverend whatever he is, this Doug Wilson,
Yes, yes.
praying or
At
and
the
Pete Hegseth,
right,
right, at the
right,
Pentagon, right, and on
and
and
yeah,
multiple versions of that, right? I mean, I was listening to um, Christy Noem's final comments as the Secretary of what is
yeah,
it, Department of Homeland Security,
yeah.
and apparently before she actually knew she had been fired.
Had been fired,
But,
right?
but
She
how
didn't
she
even
ends it
know.
though, right? I mean, on
Yeah,
script, right? She ends
yeah,
it, thanking God, maybe thanking Jesus by name. I can't remember exactly, right? But
yeah.
again,
God
the
bless.
way in which this particular regime, and this does go back to Reagan also, who, not nearly in the
Yeah,
same way, but which began to empower this movement, right? And
yes,
by the time you get
yes.
to George W. Bush, that's when you get
Bush.
the first, you know, off is not necessarily a cabinet member, but this office created in the White House, right? For
Uh huh. Uh huh.
whatever faith-based engagement or whatever it was called, right? So now, I
And
mean,
his. Hmm. Mm-hmm. I was just
yeah,
gonna say in his own declarations of I feel guided by God, and
yeah,
I am looking. You
exactly.
know what I'm saying? Those kinds of the
Hmm.
the the, the subtle the subtle entry. The subtle entry
Exactly.
of the subtle normalization, you know, and the
Exactly.
complicity of a media that does not
Yeah.
sufficiently check and examine, just
Yes.
put it through the news cycle, the inadequate news cycle that doesn't allow anybody to understand um,
To bring,
implications. Yeah,
how how often are they talking about this
yes,
Christian nationalist, Christian Zionist, end
yeah,
times
yeah,
worldview informing
yeah,
real world politics right now, real world conflict
yeah,
right now.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And so, as many people have said, as the experts warned, this is completely unjustifiable, right? A war of choice.
yes,
Ever since the first time I heard it come out was the W. Bush administration, right? This notion of a preemptive strike, right?
mm, okay,
I'm
hmm,
justified to hit you before you hit me
hmm.
because you're going to hit me. I can
You
read your
thinking about
mind. right, right,
Right.
exactly, right. You
Oh, you
know
about
that,
to hit.
this, so as they're trying to justify it, but the fact is, Israel struck Iran, right, unprovoked, as did the United States. You know, they initiated this war, as folks are saying, this war of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one does, just because one is opposed to imperialist war doesn't necessarily mean, one supports the government of Iran, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
supports theocracy, let me say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because even
Mm-hmm.
that's tricky, right? Because at the same
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, what they hate about Iran, because they empower the religious
Right.
right, the Islamic
Right.
religion, right? Just not the
Mm-hmm.
Shia, right?
Mm-hmm.
The is Iranian sovereignty, right? They are not under the boot, right? Then they have been able to act independently since 1979, right? And in their
Mm-hmm.
own interest.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a system, right? They have a constitutional system. Yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not big on theocracy, but I
Mm-hmm.
also know that
Mm-hmm.
it's not that simple, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
nuance there. I know you
Yeah.
were talking about, someone, in your circle, who's originally from Iran,
Mm-hmm.
at the, I guess it was Tuesday, yes, the Middle Eastern Club, for which for which I'm the advisor. And a couple of students were talking about, one young woman whose family is Iranian, folks in Iran, and talking about how people don't, just, it's like they don't have nuance, right? They can't understand that,
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
support the Iranian government, but you don't want your country being bombed by the United States and Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And if there, and what opposition there is to the government, you're not helping them, right, through this, because you set up a situation now where, they can be seen as unpatriotic, and indeed, more often than not, are going to defend, the country, just like, there's a loyal opposition, in other words, right? um,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
the Western, again,
Mm.
mainstream often is, and even outside of the mainstream, independent journalists who tend toward the liberal, right, maybe liberal progressive, but accept the a lot of the State Department narratives. There's almost this attitude that, all the citizens of Iran are unhappy, right, and won over,
Yeah. Yeah.
when this 90 plus, million population, the government has a lot of support, and there is a loyal opposition, right? An
Mm-hmm.
opposition that doesn't want to live under theocracy, but also wants to be
Mm-hmm.
solid, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is an
Mm-hmm.
Iranian
Mm-hmm.
left, right? Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that is not interested in imperialism, but also doesn't want to live
Mm-hmm.
under theocracy.
Mm-hmm.
And real,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, we know real people are suffering, right? Who are caught
Right.
now in that.
Right. Right. Real people suffering and caught in that. I really like the way you titled our discussion tonight. That line, expanding horizons of despair, which is apropos. The implications, the what is this as the conversation is now, um well, if it's going to be short term, essentially we'll be all right, but if it's going to be long term, and I think that I looked at something earlier that's describing long term as a matter of months. That's not no short period, that's not that's a short period of time. That's not like, protracted. You're not describing long term
Right,
in
that's
the
not
order of years.
protracted, but
You're
that's
not talking
plenty
about
of
an
time
order of
to do
years.
some
You're
damage,
talking
though.
about months. Yeah, and you're
Exactly.
talking about months. So you're saying within months, if they can hold out for months, which everyone predicts that they absolutely can because they've been planning
Mhm,
for just this moment. That is
mhm,
the
mhm.
conversation across the board, right? That uh they absolutely got some months. So they, the conversation is they got more time than the U.S. Israel uh, alliance
Yeah,
has in terms,
and more than they have ammunition to keep up what they're doing
Yes,
without having to
yes,
send in ground troops, which they really don't want to do. And
but
Iran
at the
is
same
saying, please do. If you do, yeah,
time,
we got something for you.
got something for you by all means, and that could end up happening just out of ego, but it'll be interesting to
Exactly.
see just out of
Hmm.
ego, because that's how. Well, the fact that the situation has occurred tells you all you
Hmm.
need to know, right? You know, decades of avoiding this situation, or let me say multiple administrations of avoiding this situation, that you just go on and create, that you just
Hmm.
namby pamby, go ahead
Hmm.
and do this. Um, because says all you need to know. But didn't Hegseth, was it the yesterday or the day before, float, as they're fond of saying with this, describing this administration's like mode, floated the notion of sending in troops. He talked
Hmm.
about, we don't have to, that same kind of, just that
Hmm.
little, double talky, two sides of the mouth, innuendo-ish kind of, um,
Hmm.
I should say suggestive, kind of way. Um, but it would be interesting to see how much conscientious objectorship crops up, and you know what I mean, and just other
Well, there's already,
ways that.
you know, just in terms of that, the characterization of this as a holy war by some
Yeah,
U.S. commanders
that
on
part.
various bases. There's already a
Right.
backlash within the ranks to that, right?
Right.
And then
Yes.
over
Yes.
200
Yes.
complaints from the last
Right.
report I saw. Over 200 complaints from over 50
Mhm.
installations,
Mhm.
that objecting to this characterization of this as
Yeah.
and specifically a Christian holy war that they're getting ready to fight. So yeah, I think yeah, we should expect, right, a rise in um, conscientious objection. There already been reports of sabotage
Mm.
on some of the ships
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
indicate, they're just,
Mhm.
the sailors, right, the rank and files displeasure, and
Mhm.
obvious sabotage like flushing um, shirts down toilets and things like that, right? So just um,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that ego thing, right? The ego thing is a really interesting angle because especially thinking in terms of Trump's ego, which is so
Mhm.
fragile that
Mhm.
I can see a scenario where Trump's
Mhm.
ego will end hostilities because he
Mhm.
cannot handle a loss. And
Mhm.
if it looks like a loss,
Mhm.
he's going to want to get out of it before it can be called a loss. And it's
Mhm.
already been reported, again, independent reporting, particularly from outside of the country. One particular South Asian reporter based in the UK. The channel is called Jakanta, right? Jakanta, two words, Jakanta. But he,
Mhm.
and he's reporting, daily on the conflict. He reports that the U.S. is already, because they have taken hits that aren't being widely reported or being denied by Hexeth. He reported that a couple of times the USS Abraham Lincoln has had to retreat because of the way in which it's being hit. the Iranians are focused on sinking American ships because of the Iranian ship that was sunk and under the conditions in which it was sunk on
Mm-hmm.
unarmed military exercises with India,
Mm-hmm.
to which the United States was invited but
Right.
refused to come.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that continues, right? I just, I saw a report of actually multiple F-15s being shot down. Then I see a report today, Hegseth denies downing of F-15s. If they're, them taking a beating, Trump looking bad, his ego can't handle, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Netanyahu, and we know the war criminal Netanyahu is going to continue to goad him on, but ultimately Trump looks out for Trump, right? So, um, I just wonder in terms of that ego, right? His particular fragile ego. This was also reported on Jakarta that the U.S. has already floated, and actually I've seen this reported in other spaces. The U.S. has already floated a ceasefire proposal that Iran said, no, too late for that, right? We were in talks.
Done.
We were
Right.
in talks when you attacked. They had agreed to everything, and several influencers, or I mean, I don't want to use that, content creators, reporters, independent, are
Yes.
reporting
Yes.
that. But the Omani
Yes.
government, right? The Omani representative that was, mediating, reported
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
Um, so like,
Yeah.
so they're already, they know they've taken a bloody nose, right? So they all
Yeah.
already have floated a ceasefire that the Iranians no.
Have refused. Wow. So, hey, I guess that it's a what an undefined quantity. There's a phrase I'm looking for that is not coming to mind right now, but an unknown quantity, or it's an X. What Iran is no longer predictable, except
Right.
in strategy. You don't know what they're going to decide to do and what the motives are. You know what I'm saying? What is some of the conversation has been that uh, within the in the context of the 12 days war, there was a
Mhm.
lot of conversation within Iran. It's like, more should have been done. More should there shouldn't have been such a quick retreat and such this willingness to follow form and all of these kinds of things. It don't work. So who knows what the goal is now.
Right.
So
So
uh,
that's a good yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. I thought you were
no, go ahead. No, I am done.
well, I was going to say that's a good segue, I think, because I got a little video to share, right?
Hmm.
About 3 minutes long. Um, that part right there, that whatever what was negotiable, these actions have probably made non-negotiable now, right? Um, you've hardened the heart,
Yeah,
so to speak, right? So
yeah.
anyway, I just want to show about the little, maybe like the first 3 minutes of this Kyle Kalinske video,
Mm-hmm.
which very succinctly gives the history, right? Very succinctly gives the history,
Mm-hmm.
going back to 1950s, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then makes that point, right? If this justification of we were not going to allow Iran to get a nuclear bomb. Iran wasn't trying to get a nuclear bomb,
Nuclear
right?
bomb.
The
Mm-hmm.
man. Anyway, let me share the video, um,
Okay. Yeah.
and then right, we'll go from there. Um, gonna play this 3 minutes.
So I'm here to tell you guys that absolutely everything you've been told about war with Iran is a lie. Everything you've been told about the Iranian regime is a lie. Everything you've been told about the history is a lie. When the Republicans say this war started in 1979 and they waged it, they started it, that's a lie. They all know the war actually started in 1953. And that was when the U.S. illegally overthrew a democratically elected leader in Iran called Mohammad Mossadegh. This guy was nationalizing Iranian oil to give the profits to the people of Iran. And the CIA and MI6 said, we're not going to let that happen because the oil companies need the Western oil companies need the profit from that oil. Okay. And so they went in, illegally overthrew this guy, put in a puppet dictator named the Shah, who ruled with an iron fist. And that was the U.S. and Britain meddling in the politics of Iran, overthrowing their democracy and forcing on them a dictator. And so after that, they were a little pissed at us. And that's what led to the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Okay, that's what led to that. Now, that's the history they don't tell you. What they don't tell you today is that basically every single thing the U.S. and Israel were asking for was agreed to by Iran, by the Grand Ayatollah, by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Council. In fact, hours before Netanyahu launched the first illegal attack against Iran, they agreed to zero enrichment. Zero enriched uranium stockpile. Zero. And didn't matter. It didn't matter because the negotiations were fake. They were a ruse. They were to make it look like, oh, look, we're being nice guys. We're being good guys. We're being reasonable. And, oh, these crazy Iranians just aren't playing ball. When in reality it was the exact opposite. They were faking negotiations. And Netanyahu said, I yearned to do this attack for 40 years. And he finally did it. Okay. There was never any hope for anything other than war because Netanyahu was plotting war the entire time. And Donald Trump's a fucking blackmailed asshole dipshit. Okay. And a warmonger in his own respect. Well, here's another thing. They never told you about the Grand Ayatollah. They never told you. They don't want you to know this. This changes everything. They don't want you to know this. They don't want you to see this. They don't want you to spread this far and wide. They want this to be a fact lost in the wind to history. So here's a former CIA analyst, Larry Johnson, and he's going to talk about the Grand Ayatollah who was just killed, 86-year-old Ayatollah Khomeini, and listen to what he says. This is astonishing.
Think of this. The one guy in Iran that blocked for 36 years Iran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon. The one man who stood in the way, who said, we will not build a nuclear weapon, that's the guy the United States killed. So we're sitting there saying that, oh yeah, we're doing this so Iran doesn't threaten the world with a nuke. The Ayatollah Khomeini, 36 years ago, issued a fatwa, said, no, that is evil. We're not going to go down that path. And the United States killed him, or the Israelis did, or both.
Have you ever heard that before? Have you ever heard he issued a fatwa against nuclear weapons? Have you ever heard that he repeatedly called it un-Islamic and said we have no interest in doing that? Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard that the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear agreement that Obama did, was working perfectly and that is completely and utterly undisputed by every single expert who looked at it? That all we did was give them back their own money that we had stolen from them through sanctions. And then in return for that, they let the IAEA in there from the UN to regulate their nuclear stockpile. And they could tell that they're only enriching to the point that they have power for their power grid and scientific research and aren't even trying to make a weapon. Are you aware of that? So every single thing that Netanyahu has told you, Donald Trump has told you, the Republicans have told you, the media has told you, all of it is bullshit.
We can stop there. That actually went even a little further than I intended. But yeah, I mean, that just, lays it out plainly, the duplicity, right, and the failure of the mainstream media to get that narrative out there. What nuclear weapon? And now, right, so just as you were saying, right, there's been a lot of frustration in Iran, right, about the lack of response, right? the the so-called 12-day war from last summer now, and provocations before that, particularly from Israel, right? The restrained responses of the Iranian government, and now it's like, okay, those restraints might be off, right? And again, folks are saying, I mean, just just the opposite of what we want, right? Global South countries are having to make that calculation. We must need to nuke up because the countries with nuclear weapons don't get attacked like North Korea, like India or Pakistan, right? I mean, and they may be infiltrated and all that, but there ain't no direct attacks, right?
Yeah.
And I'm this is not Islamic, right? Was the phrase that was used, right? I'm opposed to to nuclear weapons, right? All nuclear states are war criminals, right? It's a crime against humanity, right? To even to
Contemplate it.
possess nuclear weapons. Right? I mean, this, and the world ought to be figuring out how to disarm and dismantle, because an accident can happen at any freaking moment, right? So
absolutely.
Here, right, a leadership that, for all of its flaws, and the reporting on Iran, right, as over the decades has been so cartoonish, right? No allowance for any of the complexity of the society.
Yeah.
Or even just because someone is not happy with a government does not mean one is, completely unhappy with one's country or whatever, right? Or even the or seeking help from outside, right, in terms of transforming the society, because that's that becomes so problematic. For example, the reporting on the unrest in Iran, and Dr. S. Mohammed Marandi, right, who very prominent scholar, right, scholar of literature and Orientalism at Tehran University. He's a popular commentator, right, and reporting on that yes, there were demonstrations, right, in Iran, but they're overblown by the Western press, and then the demonstrations in support of the government, right, are either not covered or mischaracterized, right, and the presence of Mossad provocateurs in Iran is completely reported, right? And he's just one of many, analysts from Iran, right? That offers some nuance in trying to understand, the politics of the country and the complexity of the country. The State Department does understand and looks to exploit.
Absolutely, and that again, what is it? Your public education tax dollars at work. That systematic uneducation of the American populace, with decades now of entrenchment, responding more and more to dichotomy thinking, and what we always talk about, religiosity thinking, and that the binary good versus evil, angel versus demon divide, right, binary that accompanies that. And even at a time when the U.S. population was not thinking of its, well, let me not say the U.S. population is thinking of itself that way, even at a time when Christian nationalism was not centered, still the form of the binary form, the good versus evil binary form. I mean, the label was the axis of evil,
That's right.
right? This was the
That's right.
concept, the axis of evil, you know,
Yeah.
and so and evil is one of these terms um, that no, let me not say that. If demonization is part and parcel of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, entrenching a panic and a
Mm-hmm.
directing public
Mm-hmm.
violence, and a huge part of this, what is it called, stochastic violence and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly there can be a devil, you know, when
Mm-hmm.
that's your framework, and even
Yeah,
folk,
yeah, and that use
country
of the
who,
term "axis," right? To evoke the World War II enemy, right? Very deliberate.
right, 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 so all of which has been meaningful, which they're trying to neutralize that right quick and have us
Mm-hmm.
reconsider.
Mm-hmm.
But then all of it is much more nuanced, complex, and full of rich context
Yeah,
than the American media reporting myth, than the state
yeah.
narratives in America, um, pro- you know, uh, uh,
Mm-hmm.
report or produce
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
these oversimplified lines that folks are used to uh, used to taking in, used to digesting,
Mm-hmm.
and, used to the habit of not questioning, and the
Yeah.
habit of changing the channel.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Yeah.
the
Yeah. And
effects
and
for
what do you
our
see when you
lives. Effectively. Go on. No.
you distorted at the end there on my audio? But
Okay.
anyway, yeah, and when you
Go on.
change the channel, what do you see? Right? Because uh, uh, popular culture in the United States has been complicit in that, in creating that binary, right? I don't know how many movies over the years with the baddie Iranians. Um, there was that character, that wrestler, what, WWE or one of them, what, the Iron Sheik, I think, and even though he was like Iranian, and I think used to wave the Iranian flag, right? I don't know that there are sheiks in Iran, but
Right.
anyway,
Right.
right? The Iron
Right.
Sheik, right? In the
Right.
wrestling world,
Doesn't matter.
and right,
Right.
the movie. What was that movie? I can't remember. I think Sally Field, "Bring Back My Daughter," something like that, right?
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
and how many television shows over the decades, movies over the decades, right? B movies, straight to video movies, television movies, right? With the and sometimes the generic, Muslim terrorist enemy, sometimes the specific Iranian, Iranian Secret Service, all this other, stuff, right? So yeah, you turn the channel from the misinformation you're getting on the news channel to watch this now, military movie or whatever, or
Yeah.
spy
Yeah.
movie, reinforcing that binary, right? And that's the discourse that we get, even on what in the U.S. passes as the left, and certainly from among liberals, right? Just accepting those premises, right,
Hmm.
as givens.
Yes.
Again, completely
Yes.
ignoring the complexity of the history of the society, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm. 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 Which is all indispensable
Mm-hmm.
to having any kind of understanding, you know, having any kind of understanding, as you mentioned earlier, talking to that Iranian friend in my circles, um, became the discussion. They led with, well, I'm fine with contrary opinions, so whatever you have to, whatever you have to say, whatever your opinion is, don't worry about it and what have you. And so I said, well, actually, I don't have an opinion. I know enough about the situation, the situation, the dynamics of the situation to have an opinion. And she was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you said that." I'm so glad you said that. And just in terms of being an Iranian person living in, though I believe they grew up in the States, but their family is absolutely Persian, absolutely Iranian, and just in terms of dealing, on a day-to-day basis with folks who have no context, no understanding, none of that, and aren't looking for it, and also don't know that they don't, also don't know that they don't. And another place that we learn how to see um, how to see Islamic people and Islamic people dealing with any kind of issue of sovereignty or working politically or whatnot, the terrorist meme, which has now become the terrorist meme. We also learned that in absolutely the in the cop stories. It's part of propaganda. It's a strong in strong theme in the Law and Order series. Every now and then get a terrorist cell and this kind, and the terrorist this and the terrorist that, and people are just doing wild things for crazy reasons so all of these kinds of reinforcements. In fact, there was one that I recall on in the SVU series, Law and Order, right? The Dick Wolf franchise, narrative empire, right? Storytelling empire, where there was a person who was a victim of, victim of rape. She was a rape victim, and her husband and his brother, who were terrorists, get where they were supposed to be from, right? But they were Middle Eastern terrorists, one of whom also was quite assimilated and had a whole professional life in New York, where the story takes place, right? All of this, and had no defining features, all of these elements teaching the American population that you can't trust any of them. They're all terrible, right? And so, like the storyline, after they dispensed of the two men as just out and out terrorists and they drug them off into jail, they have this person who was a victim of these two people, right? And even though she was a victim and had been brutalized over years, she could not be trusted. She too was, she still was complicit with them. She still had to serve time, and her child in a way, and all of this, and all of this, kind of, what is it? This kind of, liberal sympathy and liberal, regret personified in the Olivia Benson character, and all of that. Well, we still have to take your child because, it is what it is, and all this bullshit. But yeah, the public absolutely has a very controlled understanding of what those dynamics are that are right essential to
now
that
suppose
is the consent.
Now suppose and yeah, what, here in Los Angeles, right? The Iranian population might be one of the largest in the world. Like many things, Los Angeles might be one of the largest Iranian cities, right?
Mhm.
The and for a
Yeah.
very long time, but certainly since 1979. The
Mhm.
but what if you are under this in this moment, right? Under these conditions and under this particular regime, what if you are an anti-war Iranian American, right? Are you going to be subject to investigation now? And just in general, from the U.S. public and civil society, right? That you when are people going to start acting out, right? Their distrust of anybody from Iran,
Yes.
and
Yes.
how soon before Iranians are going to have to feel like they need to overcompensate for
Yeah.
their citizenship and patriotism. It's
Yeah.
going to very dangerous time, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah, uh, this moment of ethnic cleansing,
Right.
all
Right.
non-Europeans are being treated as perpetual aliens, right? Perpetual foreigners, regardless of
Mhm.
the length of time in
Mhm.
the country. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
so that's
Mhm.
been something that's been occurring to me, right? Thinking about what this is going to mean for people living here. Um,
Mm.
before they begin to feel attacked or
Yeah.
start getting attacked, random
Right.
attack from U.S. citizens, and,
Right.
and again, just like now
Mm.
25 years ago, um, when the following the passing of the Patriot Act, right, in response to the
Mm.
September 11th
Mhm.
attacks. They
Mhm.
were indiscriminate about anybody.
Mhm.
If your name sounded Middle Eastern, didn't
Mhm.
they you were being investigated. We know
Mhm.
the ways in which various Muslim communities um,
Mhm.
were targeted, and but
Mhm.
also Iranian Jewish communities, because hey, your name is Iranian, right? We don't know you're Jewish until we know.
Right.
And so, and
Right.
we don't know you're Christian
Right.
until we know, right? We
Right.
don't know that you're Kurdish. We don't know that you're Azari. We don't know that you're any of these ethnic groups, right? Until we know. The So I've been thinking about that. A couple of things, right? I've been thinking about
Mm.
now the reports.
Mm.
Speaking of the Kurds and the Azaris, of the U.S. Fomenting civil war, right? Trying to make plans, arrangements to arm the Kurds, um, to foment a civil war, right? And then also
Mhm.
these
Mhm.
reports that I just saw today, and are consistent, I think, with Iranian foreign policy, and or at least Iranian um, anti-imperialist policy, anti-colonial policy. There are reports of Iranians. I don't know if this is coming from the government or commentators or whatever, but reassuring African Americans, you are not our target. We understand your condition in the United States, just as they did
Still.
in 1979, right?
Right.
When the
Right.
and that statement was made. And
Right.
the United States has worked, and not just with Iran. It's why the United States worked so hard to isolate us specifically from the rest of the world politically, because there is
Mhm. Mhm.
recognition. We don't recognize
Mhm.
enough, right?
We recognize this collectively
The
speaking.
real
Right.
relationship, right? The colonial
Right.
relationship. Now,
Right.
I think properly, there's been commentary on social media. How are they going to do that, right? I mean, how the bombs going to tell the difference? But I think that's jumping to a conclusion about the kinds of attacks they're talking about and where. I mean, if you're a U.S. soldier on a base in Bahrain, you're a U.S. soldier on the base in Bahrain, whether you black or not, right? If you're a sailor on the ship, you
Mhm.
might be Filipino. I
Right.
mean, you're a sailor on the ship,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
in terms of,
Yeah.
I don't know, other types of attacks that might happen, right? They don't know what kind of can of worms they didn't open, right?
They
So,
don't know.
maybe folks are going to be selective about, where they might be
Yeah.
doing things and whatnot. Just what is beginning to unfold now, right?
Yes.
Like everything else, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
clarifying contradictions,
Mm-hmm.
and
Because in a sense, I was going to
yeah,
say, in a sense, the hows and ifs and the realization of that may be uh, at, l- maybe as important, but maybe not as important as the value of the claim, the value of the statement. It's a
exactly.
very powerful statement. At a time also when we are witnessing and clearer about voter suppression, growing
Yes.
clarity about the
Yes.
moves to re-engage a Jim Crow type of social order.
Absolutely. That's right.
Our
Vigorous.
consciousness is primed vigorously, vigorously, and
Hmm.
they're whatever. I don't want to say there was ever any moral authority because there wasn't a moral authority, but any conversation that they wanted to have about the uh, Islamic impositions on women, coming
Hmm.
in with the Ayatollah back in the day, and that restriction and that all of that. Um, well, as you are attacking the 19th Amendment and talking all of this yang
All
about
of this.
retreating from public space, you have the same playbook. You have the same playbook. You are people of the same book.
Exactly.
This is Abrahamic. This is the
Precisely.
patriarchy. This is what that is. So
Precisely.
what do you do with that part? You know what I'm saying? But the other
Ignore
thing
it.
with black,
Ignore it, right? Just pretend like somehow
yeah,
what you're doing is different.
pretend that just pretend because just pretending works good. Just
Just
saying no,
pretending work.
you can
Just
do that.
saying so, right? Just
Just
saying
saying
so.
so works good, But making that kind of assertion at
Yeah.
a time when Black people are very clear in well, not all quarters, but in
But
the
yeah,
majority of
but
quarters.
in the majority, exactly.
In the majority of quarters, there is a clear understanding. Oh, there. This is about rolling back all kinds of clocks.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
anyway,
Right.
all of that is to say, and there are people clearly, I don't even need to say this, but people remember that first assertion, that first declaration of
Mhm.
solidarity, that first
Mhm.
declaration
That's
and
right.
release of Black US citizens.
Mhm.
They remember that. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? And I bet
Yes.
there are some living room conversations happening about
Mhm.
that. So, you know, the Westerners are not the only ones who understand soft power, who understand,
Yes. That's right.
you know what I'm saying?
And we cannot,
Um,
um, we can't underestimate just how deeply unpopular these actions are with the U.S. public.
absolutely, absolutely,
Overwhelmingly unpopular
yes,
across the political
yes,
spectrum in this country.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And again, often some of the most right wing voices, like Tucker Carlson, who, you know, like Tucker Carlson, right? Who very retrograde in his politics. The like Marjorie
Right.
Taylor Greene, right? Um,
Right.
like this, like Thomas Massey, right? Who was right there clapping along with the other Republicans at the State of the Union, but it's, you know, it's been stalwart on the Epstein Trump files and on this, right, and being opposed to the, you know, what justifies this, even among them, right, and in some ways being even more vocal than the Democratic leadership, which again, the anti-Iran thing has been bipartisan forever, right?
Right.
So
Right.
once again, what passes as leadership in the Democratic Party is being outflanked by some of the most regressive voices in the Republican
Right.
Party, right?
Right.
You know,
Right.
Democratic leadership is so alienated from its base,
Mm-hmm.
and its youthful or younger, you know, candidates and politicians and members, right, activists and whatnot. So anyway, um,
Fair to say, none of them are responsive to the wishes of the public. None of them are responding or
none of
listening
them.
to the wishes of the public.
That's right.
You know, but a handful. You know, but a handful. But that's certainly not their chief concern. What the public
Yes,
wants is certainly not their chief concern.
and they generally are all in accord, generally speaking. And unfortunately, even Bernie, right, who might be the best of them, on foreign policy. Right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
just, I'm so unfortunate that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe here or there, right, there's some opposition, but um,
Mm-hmm.
again, just like so
Mm-hmm.
many of the liberal and self-described progressive commentators who
Mm-hmm.
just take as a given the various State Department descriptions of other countries' leaders, right? It's just taken as a given
Mm-hmm.
that Maduro is a
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote bad guy.
That
Um,
guy.
and I
They
do
all say
not,
the
and
same.
yes, and the Iranian government has been repressive, right? So ain't nobody in
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
denial around that, or uh,
Yeah.
um, being
You know, being
well, that's that in denial or over, minimizing that, but also, um, it's a leader that ruled with restraint, even though it may not seem like that. And again, it's just one man. It may have been
mm-hmm.
the grand Ayatollah, but the so-called supreme
Mm-hmm.
leader, but did not have
Right.
absolute power, right? Um,
Yeah. Right.
and
Yeah.
was
Right.
respected as a
Right.
religious leader and a scholar. In terms of his
Mm-hmm.
death,
Mm-hmm.
it has been reported. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's been a lot of crowing about we got him, but it's also been
Mm-hmm.
reported that he was, hey, let's get you out of here, right? Let's get you to a safe space, and him saying no. I'm going to face what the people are facing.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Right? I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to face what the
No,
people are
it's
facing.
right.
I'm not
Right.
going to,
Right.
I'm not going to fly
Right.
to Germany the way
Yeah.
Netanyahu did, right? The
Mm-hmm.
And so, right, he paid the price, right, but all this does is enhance his status as a martyr for not just the Shia in Iran, but the Shia
Right.
in the region and the world. And it is
Mm-hmm.
not, there it
Hmm.
among the African American Muslims of the United
Yes.
States, there is an element that is
Yes.
Shia, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is an element that
Mm-hmm.
is Shia. And this was a religious leader. I like the way I heard a description of it today. I forget who. Um, I listened to Sina Tusi, um, an Iranian analyst earlier, but no, it wasn't him. I can't remember. Oh, let me see who. I'm trying to remember which analyst said it. But the point he made, though, is what people don't realize, he was not just a political leader, but a religious leader, and it being Ramadan at that, right?
Yes.
He described it as somebody shooting the Pope during Holy Week,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
That this is what
Right.
maybe people in the West do not understand, right? That this is not. This is,
No.
in terms of its global implications, it certainly is regional. Its global implications, but this was like shooting the Pope, during Holy Week, and in
Mm-hmm.
order to get
Mm-hmm.
people to try to understand the gravity of what Israel and the
Mm-hmm.
United States
Mm-hmm.
have initiated,
Mm-hmm.
and to understand the gravity of the religious ideology that is driving U.S. policy and that Israeli government policy is willing to exploit, right, to get what it wants. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in terms of these folks thinking they are hastening Armageddon and the return of Jesus of Nazareth, and they are very serious, or at least they need to be
And
taken seriously.
yeah, someone's taking it very seriously, and there's
Yeah.
you know
Let me be clear though. I put Sina Tusi's name because that's another analyst people might want to look up. I'm pretty sure it wasn't him that made that analogy. I'm trying. I still can't pull up who it was. But anyway, he is an analyst. Folks might want to, look for his work, right? And I think based in
mm-hmm.
Iran. I know he's Iranian. And anyway, Sina.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we've been at this for almost an hour and a half.
And a half. Yes, it has.
So maybe we can start wrapping.
I would think so. Um, the throwing in, but not to expand for 15 minutes on it, adding 15 minutes of program, but in terms of uh, perception and different, the different ways that moments capitalized are capitalized on by the regime to further its further its ethno state agenda and further its you know but impugning of criminalizing of populations exist agenda, but
Mhm.
that shooting uh, that happened in Texas, the brother with the property of Allah, you have not heard?
This is
Yeah,
recent.
this was recent. In fact, let me get a date. This was updated March 2nd, Sunday. This happened Sunday.
Mhm. No,
Um,
I'm unfamiliar with what happened. Missed
yeah,
that
and,
news.
and there was like a lot of people at first are like, this is some kind of psyops. This is some kind of, or just concocted, some concocted propaganda being circulated,
Mhm.
but
Mhm. What
apparently
happened? Hmm.
it's verified. But so anyway, this older brother, who may be, considering his name, he may be from here, he may be from like West Africa, maybe Senegal or Gambia or one of Guinea, maybe one of those countries, because his name is in Indiaga Diagne, Indiaga Diagne, and I might be totally butchering that. But yeah, shot. I think 2 people were killed. Another dozen or so were wounded. But yeah, well, the point that they
Wait,
were,
wait. Who did the
focusing in
shooting?
on
Who
this
did the
brother.
shooting?
His brother,
He did. He did the shooting.
he,
Okay.
he did the shooting. Um, Again, this in Indiaga Diagne. Okay. Um, a 53-year-old brother, and shot some folks. And of course, what the focus is that he had on this property of Allah um, sweatshirt, right? Um, with an Iranian flag on the back or something like that. A lot of folks kind of pick that apart as kind of unlikely on a number of levels, not the least of which is the Ramadan fact, the Ramadan factor, not the least of which I've heard someone say that the representation, of the of the name, this notion of the name of God and the iconography, of God being very non-Islamic, a very non-Islamic um, thing to do. No one's trying to have a name of Allah t-shirt, kind of a thing. But in any event, just looking at the potential for that to be seized upon and capitalized upon to turn attention to Black Muslim communities here and to, ramp up anti-Black Muslim panic, Um, so just putting that in at the end, We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll see.
because now all eyes are on Iran, but we'll see, because it wasn't just
Yeah,
property of but
that's the
this
other
Iranian
part.
flag. Mm-hmm.
With all eyes on Iran, what are they going to try to sneak through in other places, including here in this, the United States?
Absolutely.
So, but we'll, some of us are paying
Mm-hmm.
attention. Like I said, they suddenly there's this an action going on in Ecuador, right? Around
Mm-hmm.
battling drug cartels.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they are. The 21st century imperialism is on the march, but I am confident in the resistance that they're going to face, that they are facing now, and that they're going to continue to face in the global South.
Yeah.
And what this is going
Yeah.
to mean,
And
I think, ultimately
yeah.
for neo-colonial governments, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
we've already seen playing out, right, in places like the Sahelian states, right, and um, so we'll see what's going to come,
Mhm.
and in these Gulf states, right, that you're being bombed because of your complicity with
Mhm.
the United States. And again,
Mhm.
what's being bombed are U.S.
These
installations
are installations.
and
Yes.
places where there were reports of, in
Yes.
some places, hotels being bombed. But there are hotels where U.S. personnel are, what is it?
Yeah.
Intelligence reports say U.S. personnel is, right. So they are trying to focus that, and here's now the cost, right, of these relationships with the empire that are coming home.
Mhm.
And that's something, yeah, exactly. We don't need to extend it, but to come back around to it, because there's so much around these Gulf states, their
Mhm.
creation, and the kinds of inequality. Um, as it was saw a report where like a country like Qatar, um,
Mhm.
only like maybe 10% of the population is actually citizenry, and the rest is
Mhm.
made up of migrant workers, guest workers, and et cetera, who
Mhm.
basically have no rights.
Mhm.
And that's just a model for
Right.
lots of these others. And so, but we'll come back to that,
Yeah.
right? As
Yes.
they're
Yes.
now paying the price for their complicity with empire.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah. And we will see, how things
And
unfold, what happens within Iran, what happens to the loyal opposition in Iran. Um, whatever they thought they had achieved, the Iran, just like the Venezuelan government, right? It has not been destroyed. It is, um,
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela is not as in a strong position, um,
Mm-hmm.
but they are they're still whole and able to, figure out a response. Iran has been preparing for this for how many
Mm-hmm.
decades, right? So um, the empire, may have overreached, and they're taking a
Mm-hmm.
pounding, right? Israel is taking a pounding, and U.S.
Mm-hmm.
installations are taking a pounding. And I wonder about this only 6 casualties thus far. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
Guinness Hexeth has already
Mm-hmm.
indicated the hostility with sharing casualties, right? Sharing um,
Yeah.
numbers of casualties is,
Yeah.
inappropriate, something that feeds the so-called fake press. But anyway, we're wrapping up,
Mm-hmm.
getting
We're
started
wrapping
back
up.
up. So let
Well,
me say good night. Thank you, folks. Thank you. I know we've had some viewers throughout this conversation. Thank you for being here with us. We are the Joko Collective, and this is a Joko conversation. As you can see on the screen, I'm Yusef. That's Tasha. We would love for you to do all the things. Please subscribe to our channel. We know our little subscriptions are growing, and we want to keep them growing. Please please like the video. Help us with the algorithm. It also helps if you share. And we need a favor, right? We need to know that the comment section works. Would somebody leave a comment, on the video? Just say you liked it or you didn't like it. Just leave a comment. Join the
mm-hmm.
conversation. We'll respond to the comment. And that helps that helps with the algorithm, right? When folks are commenting, so please comment. When you're seeing this, if you're watching this live or when you see this later, please do that for us. So with that,
It would be great.
wouldn't it though?
It'd be great. You just
Yes,
to have also just some back and forth and some conversation, some comments to respond to would be
please.
great.
Yes,
Algorithm
it would.
notwithstanding.
Yes,
But
it
yes,
would.
go ahead. Go ahead, please do.
No, that's all.
Go
I was
ahead.
closing too, right? So yes, expanding
Yes.
horizons of despair. That is what the United States is involved in. And,
Yeah.
increasing the despair that already
Yeah.
exists in the world, along
Yeah.
with their partner right now, and in some
Yes.
ways their spearhead right now, Israel, the
Mm-hmm.
colonial, the settler colonial state of
Mm-hmm.
Israel, in partnership with the
Mm-hmm.
settler colonial state of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with that, we will say good night, good
Good
morning,
night.
good afternoon, whenever you're watching this. And I'll end the way I always end, quoting Bob Marley. From the Natty Dread album, the song Revolution, revelation reveals the truth. It takes a revolution to make a solution. Let's make a revolution, y'all, and we will see you next time.